when we're ready.
Action.
Okay. So, welcome everybody to Gallery Chimera. I am Caleb Morgan. I'm one of the owners. My wife, Alicia Morgan, is the other owner. And we have with us today two of the artists that we're featuring at the gallery, Susie Schultz and Xavier Robbins. And we are going to be hitting them with the hard questions and figuring out their process and everything else. So we got pre-questions here that are like pre-made, and then we'll also have audience questions as well. So you guys can think about what you would like to ask these people. To start off with, Susie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and just your artistic background?
Okay.
Just some influences.
My mom's an artist, and I grew up going to art fairs and art galleries and seeing her paint and seeing her involvement in the art world. And it was always it seemed so mysterious to me. And I thought it was such a cool environment. And I thought one day it would be really nice to be a part of that. I didn't study art in college. I studied math education, and I started off my career by teaching high school over at Lakeside High School. I grew up in St. Petersburg, Florida, and moved to Atlanta. Yeah, Florida. Anybody else from Florida? And moved to Atlanta after I graduated from college, and then taught high school, and then I was overseas in Eastern Europe in the late 80s. And when I came back, I realized I didn't want to teach anymore. And so I was introduced to a man that would later become my boss and mentor at a missions agency with the Presbyterian Church. And so he had me I really hadn't painted at that point. I had just done drawings. And so he saw that perhaps I had some talent, and his gift is investing in people. And so he invested in me as an artist. And he got me to start doing drawings for brochures and t-shirt design, illustrations for the magazines. He said, come in and learn the Mac. And so he just really mentored me and got me started being an artist. And after I'd been there about 6 years, he and his wife left to go on the mission field. And he said, if you stay, you're going to be doing proofing and typesetting. And you need to do artwork full time. So your job is going to be over in 2 months. And so I had some severance pay and some savings. So I looked for studio space, and I just started doing artwork. I did a lot of illustration. I did portraiture, anything that I could find to do what I wanted to do and earn money from it. And so I've been doing that since 95 or 96.
So, Xavier, the same question to you. So,
my influences.
Influences, background. Just give us like a brief synopsis how you kind of arrived at this point.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's see. I was a tattoo artist for about 7 years or so, maybe about how old is my daughter? She's 9 now. So yeah, probably like 12 years ago, I started tattooing full time, and I did that for about 7-8 years. And after a while, I kind of had to make some decisions as far as what I wanted to do as an artist. And I just kind of went looking, and I eventually kind of found a guy who would teach me at this figure drawing group that we had on Tuesdays at the Portfolio Center. I don't know if anybody knows where that used to be, but it's closed, or they closed down that group after COVID. But jumping into that whole environment was really awesome. Cool thing about it was, my teacher, I found his, before I even met him, I found his art book in the Barnes and Noble store. And this was the time I didn't even know who the dude was. I just was and I was trying to figure out my life, what I'm going to do. I picked up his book, and I was like, oh, this dude is incredible. Whoa, what is he doing? And didn't really I bought it, didn't really think much of it, but I showed my friends and all that kind of stuff, check this guy out. And then because I was still cool with certain people in the tattoo industry, somebody said in a shop, I went by a shop one day, and she goes, oh yeah, we're going to this figure drawing group hosted by Brian Stelfreeze. And that happened to be the same guy whose book I just bought. And I was like, oh, y'all going? I'm going, and so I just came in there and never left. I tried to pick his brain as much as I possibly could. I still talk to him to this day, but he's a really big influence on how I approach art and things that I do now. And but I've been doing art and everything for like a really long time, but I just don't really count everything before I started learning. Just because I'm really interested in wanting everyone else to kind of understand, like, it's not about me being talented. It's just someone taught me. So, I believe that's possible for everybody else. And that's kind of like my influence and my background on art in general. So I think that's about all you need to kind of know at this point.
So, Susie, a question for you. How do you balance tradition and innovation in your artistic practice?
Yeah, that's really tough. I mean, I have always loved drawing, and I've drawn ever since I was a kid, and I've always enjoyed drawing faces and people. And so I've been very drawn to traditional art, but some of my favorite artists have both traditional art and rendering skills with like an abstracted background, or including metaphorical elements, or like against an old crumbling wall. Or so the pieces that I like the most have both of those elements. And I have recently started, I teach a watercolor class. And as part of the class, I had never done thumbnail sketches, but I'd heard that they were a good thing to do. So I thought, well, I need to learn how to do them because I need to teach my students that this is part of a process. And in doing these fine charcoal thumbnail sketches, I was able to create these very abstract sketches that I could then use to create a finished piece. Because when you're creating, the tendency is to finish everything equally. You want to finish everything and have everything, but I find that if I don't stop myself at some point, the painting will feel static, and it will lose that dynamic of having something that's highly rendered and highly three-dimensional with something that is more abstracted. So that's kind of the line that I am walking and continue to try and figure out in my work.
Awesome. Xavier,
Yeah.
how has your work been influenced by other artists and artistic movements, both historically and contemporary?
Oh, historically, not at all.
Half the question gone. All right. Terrific.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I do look at people from the past. Like, I've looked at Sargent, I've looked at Rockwell, I looked at Leyendecker, I've looked at Bernie Fuchs, who's an old illustrator. I've looked at all those people, but like, really the more current people who like are in my field, I pay attention to what they're doing, just because, like, what I want, I'm always after like the purest knowledge I can attain. And so I always look at, like, almost like my contemporaries, like, well, they're doing a thing, and I want to know what it is that they're doing. And then when I kind of break that down, I'll look at someone from the past and go, oh, but that thing was there too. So I try to get like a full scope of just what has worked, not just historically, but also works now. And every artist that I look at and I follow, I'm influenced more so with their mindset and how they're going to approach the art, and not really like their style or anything. I just want to know what is it that's driving them and why they're doing it. And then once I kind of figure out the why, then that gives me some options to kind of go, oh, okay, well, that might not line up with what I'm doing, but at least I understand it. Or if it does line up with what I'm doing, then I can go, well, now I can express what I want to express because I now know the intent behind the pieces and that they're doing. So historically, yeah, maybe, but more so now, like, I look at whoever's kind of like in my field and try to really pick their brains as much as I possibly can.
Nice. So, Susie, how do you see the role of representational figurative art in today's contemporary art scene? Is it still relevant? Is it evolving?
Oh gosh. I mean, that is such a loaded question because for years and years, the traditional art teaching was you learned from the old masters and you were able to gain skills so that you could then take those skills and create something of your own. Mm. And I think around the 60s, that sort of stopped. And artists were encouraged to create out of their genius and to totally ignore what had come before. Mm. And so you have artists that have these visions and want to create something, but have not been given the skills and the practice and the hard work to develop the knowledge that you need to create something that's in your head. You know, to take something that's in your head and to bring it onto the canvas, you can't just imagine it there. You need to develop skills. And so it's interesting because there's been, I don't know how many in the last maybe 2 decades, mm-hmm. there's been a resurgence of traditional contemporary or traditional teaching with the figure. And these things called ateliers have sprung up. And they have gone back to teaching the traditional method of learning the figure. And so I think now there's been a resurgence of figurative work. And there has been a resurgence of a lot of 20 and 30 somethings that are doing this phenomenal work that I didn't see 20 years ago. And so I think because there are so many of those young artists doing that, it is recognized as a new trend or a new something that is valid. And so I feel like, you know, there's always that juxtaposition mm-hmm. of the contemporary sort of postmodern art world right. and the figurative art world. And when they can merge together, that's really nice, but that doesn't always happen.
Do you feel that it's more of a trend, or do you feel like it's something that's going to continue on into the future past this current generation?
I feel like it's something that's going to continue.
Good.
At least I hope it is.
Yeah, well, I think as artists, I think we all hope so.
Yeah.
Xavier, this is more directly towards you. Can you tell us more about your upcoming creator-owned book? What inspires the stories and the characters, and what can we expect from it?
Ooh, man, that's kind of a loaded one. I did. Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because you know, once everything kind of settles down with, like, you know, after the conventions that I'm gonna do, I'm trying to figure out what I'm gonna do. That's one of the things that's on the list to kind of like really hit hard. But the book is titled The Suicide Queen. Just you guys now, if you watch this YouTube video, like, you now know the title, okay? So, but yeah, it's really more so inspired by just, well, first of all, just I want to tell great stories. Like, and when I say that, what I want to do is have the characters kind of mimic what I perceive happens day to day with people in, like, that I interact with, like, all the time. So it's a little tricky because I want to be able to tell you what to expect, but the only thing I can kind of give you is, like, the genre is more sci-fi. I like sci-fi. I like action. So there's going to be explosions. There's probably going to be some crazy things happening, flying in the air and whatnot. And you know, my style of storytelling, or the way that I like to kind of deliver experiences, is a little edgy. You know, I feel like I'm kind of being a little light because we're on YouTube, but I think
it's not like YouTube's exactly a PG.
It's okay. Not.
It's all right.
It's not. But I think the people who talk to me like on a week-to-week basis, they kind of know I'm a little, I'm not this mild mannered when I'm talking about art. So yeah, I think you can just look forward to just, me really putting my best foot forward, telling the best story I possibly can. I don't think it's going to be like 12 comic book, sort of thing, but maybe it could be. I just want to put something down that is of the highest quality of storytelling that I possibly can do. And some of the characters you may like, connect with, some of them, I don't really care about that one, But overall, I hope that people will enjoy it. And because it's been a long time I've been working on it. And I heard someone say, like, you don't really write a book like to make money. Like, you write a book because it works. So that's what my aim is. I want whatever I'm going to do to work. And that's all I can really give you on that one.
That's fair. That is fair. Susie, can you give us some insights into your choice of color palette or medium, and what is the significance in your work?
I've always been, even as a child, I've been drawn to the work of artists like Andrew Wyeth and Hubert Sheptrine, and I've always been very drawn to more muted palettes for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. And so in the work that I create, even though if you look closely, you might see 15 different colors, and there might be bright colors in there, but combined together, they make a more muted palette. And I'm not sure why I selected that, or if it's just something that selected me. But it's just what I've always been drawn to. And I find that when I started creating, I am just drawn to these more moody scenes and more contemplative and having a sense of mystery and some sort of unseen beauty. And I feel like that limited palette kind of expresses that a little better.
Okay. Do you find it necessary for the viewer to know what your media or medium is? Or is it just not necessary?
I don't think so. I mean, a lot of artists, like I as an artist, want to know the medium and the process of other artists' work. But I also want to be moved by what they paint. I want it to say something to me of the human condition, or of some emotion, whether it's positive or negative. I seek themes of things that I talk a lot about, or I heard this term and I've incorporated it into my artist statement, that this French theologian used, called a second innocence. For some reason, I really responded to that. I mean, there's a first innocence where, there's a purity, there haven't been any scars, there haven't been any failures. And then there's a second innocence that comes out of the struggles of life and the effects that those have had on us. I mean, a lot of the people that I paint are my neighbors who have gone through a lot of struggles, and it has made them, there's like a dignity and a power and a beauty because they have gone through these things and come out on the other side with a resilience and something that I can't even necessarily put into words, but I'm very drawn to it. And so that may also have something to do with kind of why I paint what I paint.
Okay. Awesome. I mean, this is great insight as far as that goes. I mean, I think everybody wants to kind of know where the medium or whatever it comes from, but that's terrific.
Yeah.
Xavier, so obviously, so what do you have for me now?
No, I'm good. Shoot away.
So obviously you are a big color fan. Color is very enigmatic in your work. It's obviously a very important choice. So can you share some insights into your choice of color palette, and what is the significance of that palette to your work? Specifically what we're showing in this current collection here.
Okay, well, as far as color is concerned, it only works if like all my blacks and whites work. And that's where I have to start first. Second order of business is I'm never influenced by what the audience wants me to do with color. More so because what I'm trying to push is the idea that every decision that I'm going to make, I'm in control of that decision. And if it's true to what I'm going to do, you're going to feel the experience that I'm delivering. And any color choice that I make, honestly, it could be really wrong. I mean, I could literally, like, I don't ever see blue on a person, but I'll put blue there just because, oh, this feels right. And it works because, like, the way that our eyes work, we don't actually have to see every single color. So knowing that, I can just freely make choices, and I could put blue, green, orange right next to each other, and they don't have anything to do with each other. But if my values are right, if I have like the big black shape and the big white shape and the big black and the big gray shape, and they all work to make a great composition, then any color I put down in between is going to be whatever, like it's going to work. So I'm always trying to kind of like push against the idea that, oh, like I'm going to do something right. Because I'm not. I'm probably, as a matter of fact, I'm willing to bet I'm going to fail at this before it's all said and done. But I've learned over time to use my failing color choices as a part of my style. And the more I do that, the more comfortable I get with just the expressions of color that you're probably going to get. Yeah. And it's really not a secret in terms of like how I'm going to do it. I just say, if you're someone who's trying to like figure out how to really push your color, what I would do is go to a figure drawing group and just use a bunch of colors. And then once you're done, throw all of that away. And then you will know, okay, well, in my brain, I did this thing and it either worked or it didn't. And then you can save that for later, you know?
So do you feel like, for a beginning artist maybe, because when you see your pieces, they are so full of color, is it more important for a beginning artist or somebody that's less experienced to focus more on the value as compared to the hue of the colors themselves?
Oh yeah. The value is the biggest thing. As a matter of fact, value is base one for any decisions you're going to make. Because this is the way I can explain it to you. All right. Imagine you've got like a bar that's like, about this long, and this represents like 100% of the way that your eyes kind of see things, right? Now, you've got rods on this side, and then you've got cones on this side. These are all happening in your eyes at the same time, all right? Now, imagine you put like a mark about 85% of the way on this bar. That's how much value you can, like, that you're going to see compared to like the 15 to 10% of the color. So what that says to me is, well, we don't really see color at all. and knowing that, I can just go, all right, well, let me focus on the 85% of the values that you are actually going to pay attention to. And then the 15% to 10%, I can just sort of do whatever I want with. And not only that, when I tell you like to pay attention to that person's eyes, I might put like a really intense orange there. And then you're going to pay attention to that person's eyes because you cannot help it. So when it comes to color, I'm always trying to just say, pay attention to the values, the bigger values first. Color will come later, and you will be awesome at it.
I agree. And looking at your work, it's very obvious that if you have a good sense of the strong values, you can almost put whatever color you want in there, as long as the value of that color is fine. It doesn't really matter what the hue is. You're just picking hue for interest, value for context.
Yeah.
That's what I say.
Yes.
Susie, this one is for you. Can you talk about the significance of working from a live model in your artistic process, and how does this process enhance your understanding and depiction of the human figure?
Working from life is much more difficult than working from a photograph. But having said that, there's an energy when you are interacting with something that is alive rather than something that is just two-dimensional. Mm-hmm. You're limited to the amount of time you have. Working from a photo, I could spend a month on a piece. But working from life, I may have a few hours with a model. So it makes me focus a lot more clearly, and there's just something very satisfying about the process of working with a model, because you have an interaction with that person. There's just an energy that you get from each other. And working from life, there's much less of a chance that you're going to get something that you keep. I mean, probably 19 out of 20 pieces that I create working from life end up in the recycle bin. So, but that's just part of the process. And I know that going into a session, and that's actually fairly freeing. And I'm fortunate to have the opportunity to work from life 3 times a week. And so I have found that as I've been working from life that many times a week, my skills are getting better, and I'm more comfortable going into the studio, and there's more of a chance that I might get something that I really like.
Do you find that maybe the relationship between you as an artist and a model is almost symbiotic? Is it almost something that the both of you can kind of read each other without even reading? I've heard people say that there's almost like an energy that happens between the artist and the model eventually over time. Does that play into the work as well? Does that make you gear towards certain types of models as compared to others?
I do know that if I've worked with a model, the more I work with a model, the more comfortable I get with that model. And the more ideas I get, the more I feel like I can make more paintings. When you first work with a model, there's an awkwardness because you want them to be comfortable. You don't know each other. You're staring at this person. You hope they're okay with it, But the more you work with someone, you realize you become comfortable with each other. You develop a level of trust. They can become a muse, and they present things to you that you might not have come up with yourself. And so the more you work with someone, the more ideas you get, and the more you can explore things that you might not have thought of before. So there's something very valuable about working from life.
I would totally agree. I haven't done it myself. I agree. It's very much so. Xavier, this is for you. How do you decide on the themes or subjects in your artwork? Are there particular messages or emotions that you are trying to convey to the viewer?
I mean, there are particular emotions and whatnot that I'm trying to convey, but you will never know them.
So enhance upon that. Is there a reason why? Is this a guarded thing, or is this like a more of an app to have the viewer decide for their own?
Yeah, it's really more of that, because I never want, like, if I was watching a movie, I don't want someone coming and telling me, hey, you know what that means? Every 5 minutes in the movie. Yep. Like, I want to, like, if the experience is what it needs to be, then I'm going to watch it, I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm going to come up with a conclusion on, like, based off what they presented. And so for me, I'm like, well, if I tell you what the intent was and then you come back and say, oh yeah, like that was the thing, I'm like, well, then I don't really know if I hit it or not. If you come to me and I've never told you what I was planning on doing, and you use the words that I was thinking in my head, I go, oh, well, then I nailed that. So everything I'm going to do is really trying to figure out, like, well, if this is working, then the viewer, the audience is smart enough to tell me it's working. And I try to trust them as much as I possibly can to tell me, like, well, the feeling of this is what I got from this piece. And when I hear that, I go, all right, now I got that locked in. And from that point, actually, I can reproduce that same feeling. And I don't, it's kind of like one of the other artists that we have featured here, Kevin. He sculpts and he makes molds of his figures before he like casts them and all that kind of stuff. And then we just found out the other day he just throws those away. He's like, okay, I made the mold, and I've got all that kind of going, so I don't really need this all this clay that I just spent hours molding into a figure or whatever. So he'll melt that down and do something else with it.
Yeah.
But he's got the mold and he can reproduce that and do that thing over and over again. And I just try to do the same thing with people's emotions. I just go, okay, well, I see that affected you some kind of way. So now that I know what that was, and I've got these very simple variables that I did to make you feel that way, I can do that anytime I want to. And it's kind of like emotion molding or something like that.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
So I'm always playing around with that, and what comes with that too is you gotta be willing to fail at the drawing. Like if you go into it and you try to make it perfect, make a perfect drawing, then you're just going to miss the lesson because it's like you got to be able to fall, enough to really get it. And so I will say too, like fall faster than you normally think you should. Like fail faster, and then you will, figure all that stuff out. But that's kind of like the reason why I do what I do is I want to know what the emotion that the viewer is getting, and then they'll report back to me and say, "Dude, you're nailing that. Keep doing that." And I go, "All right, yes, ma'am, or yes,
sir." Whatever you say. So this question is actually, I'd like to have answers from both of you on this one. Okay. So art is the currency of history. How do you see your art equity in 100 years?
Oh gosh, I have no idea. I mean, you always hope that, I guess I have a hope that my artwork will, in my current time, inspire and connect. And I guess I don't think that much about my, the legacy that I'm going to leave. Although I guess I would hope that it would be something. But, when I see something that moves me, and I think as artists or as creatives of any kind, we are seeking for those things that give our life meaning. We're seeking those things that sort of point to something greater than what we're experiencing. And in my practice as an artist, those are the things that I try and pay attention to. Like if I see something, or I see a person's face, or the way that objects interact with each other that put a lump in my throat, I may not even know why, but I want to explore that because I think it points to something greater, even if I can't put a name to it. And so my hope is that in my current time, that my work will make a difference in how people see each other, in how people see themselves, in how people see suffering, in how people see redemption, because that's what I'm searching for. And I'm hoping that in my search, through my painting, I will find those things, and I hope that those who look at my work do too.
Awesome.
I know that didn't answer your question, but
no, but it's a tough question to answer. But I'm always curious as to how an artist is going to view their legacy in time. Are you going to go the route of Van Gogh and become famous 80 years after your death? Or are you going to be an Andy Warhol and be famous in the time and enjoy it?
I would rather be famous during my time.
Okay.
Be able to pay my bills and go out with my friends every once in a while and
there you
afford
go.
My studio.
Exactly. No cutting off of the ear. We don't need any of this. Yeah, I feel you.
Need both my ears.
Xavier, the same question. Would you like me to repeat the question, or do you have it?
Repeat that
Okay.
question.
So, art is the currency of history. How do you view your artistic equity in 100 years?
Man, in 100 years, I'll probably be the GOAT, but
So he's Tom Brady. Tom Brady of color figurative work.
I mean, but like, you know, I don't think too much about that, honestly. I just kind of, I put it to you like this. The reason why I'm so invested in storytelling is because I actually truly believe no one's going to remember my art. You know, they're going to remember the feeling that they got, whether or not they saw a piece that I did, or they met me, or they saw me do something at a convention, or like, these are the things that I try to build up as much as possible, so that like when I'm gone, or if I'm never in your presence, you know, you're still gonna kind of be like, oh man, well, he really did try to do the best that he could, like, given what he had.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, like, and I've got 4 kids, and you know, I like, people sometimes will kind of look at me and go, well, what are you leaving behind, like, for your kids and everything? And I'm just like, well, it won't be the art. You know, it'll be the things that I instilled in them while they saw me making it. And if those are the things that get passed on, then I think I can literally, like, be okay being gone, because my kids they'll say, okay, my dad really, you know, it wasn't the most conventional thing that he could have done, because no one ever says, oh, I'm going to be an artist and I'm going to make a lot of money and I'm going to like, we just don't do that. But they would have seen me really put as much as I could into understanding and learning and doing the best that I could with whatever it was. So if one of them decides, hey, I want to be a janitor, I will say, yes, apply those same things that you saw me do to whatever it is that you're doing. And if they got that, then I'm like, that's all I need, you know, and everything else will kind of just fall into place however it's supposed to be. If people remember my art, if I'm in a book or a magazine, or if they're talking about me in the same breath as Sargent, I'm like, or whoever your famous artist that you like, I'm like, okay, cool, but that's not what makes me kind of go every day. You know, I enjoy the work, I enjoy doing what I do, and I hope that other people get inspired to do the same.
Amazing. Awesome. So we're going to do one more question for each one of you guys before we go to the audience for them to ask their questions. I can see them waiting. Susie, have you encountered any memorable experiences or challenges throughout your artistic career that have significantly impacted your own work?
Could you read that again?
Yes. Okay. Have you encountered any memorable experiences or challenges throughout your artistic career that have significantly impacted your work?
I mean, I think it's hard to pick like one or two things, but you know, the older you get, the more experiences you have, and I'm older, and I do feel like there's a resilience that I am seeing in myself. Because of the nature of some of the work I do, I can sometimes receive criticism from people that I used to want approval from. And I have had some of that, and I've realized, oh, wow, that didn't tear me apart. That didn't, you know, maybe I don't care so much about what the cool people think. And that was very freeing. I do feel like, you know, with any artist, people are always going to question, well, why is it that you paint that? Or shouldn't you paint this? You know, you could make more money if you painted that. And I find that I had something happen early on in my career where I painted this, it's probably 20, 25 years ago. I painted this really pretty cup with a doily. And then I also painted this man that I saw waiting for the bus.
Mhm.
And because something in his face just really drew me in. And I thought, nobody's ever going to buy that. He's looking right at the viewer. And I entered it in a watercolor competition, and they called me and told me it sold. And I was like, what? And I still have that coffee cup or the teacup. So that was a lesson for me early on to paint what I'm moved to paint, because it's not just about creating the work. It's a venue for me to experience something of life, to notice the things that move me,
Mhm.
to have the experience of being both a vessel and a participant, to come into something where I don't know. I mean, as artists, we create something out of nothing. It wasn't there before. As writers, you do that. As performers, as any sort of creative endeavor, you create something that was not there before. And so there is something very intimidating about that, but also very satisfying when you can create something that perhaps you hadn't even imagined that you could create.
Mhm.
And so I also think something that I've experienced is I usually, in the middle of a painting, I don't like it. I don't feel like it's working. I get frustrated, but I know that that's happened, probably 100 times before. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't derail me, and I can usually pull it out. The piece up here that's the I am piece has had 3 different backgrounds. Mm. And and let me know if I'm getting too long.
No, you're fine.
But with that piece, a neighbor of mine, I live in a building that's a 100-year-old elementary school. And one of my neighbors had water damage. And so she took down her sheetrock, and behind the sheetrock, there were all these layers of where the old chalkboard had been and different layers of history. And somebody had spray painted I am on the wall. And it just gave me chills. And I thought, I have to do something with that. And so I incorporated it at first. I didn't like it. So I took it out. I put birds in the back. I called it Migration. It was like that for a few months. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, So I pulled it back and I reworked it. And it's finally where I want it to be. So one of the things I've learned is that there are many failures in the middle of a piece that are going to be a part of the process.
I think the failures probably make the piece better. If you're satisfied the whole way through, I feel like you're probably going to come up with a subservient piece.
Right.
Yes, I would agree with you on that. Xavier, final question before we go to the audience.
All right.
And this has to do with your conventions, because this is unique to you.
Okay.
How do you approach illustrating characters at conventions, especially from when working from request? And do these interactions with your fans influence your own creative processes?
Ooh, I love doing convention stuff. Mainly because, and go to your point about the interaction, what usually ends up happening is they'll just simply tell me what the character is. They'll just go, oh, I want Batman, or I want Catwoman, or whatever. And it's so simple that I can either go, oh, yeah, I want to do that. Or I'm like, I ain't got it, and it really is that rarely happens, but I like the simplicity of someone just being direct enough to say, this is what I want. I'm not going to give you a laundry list of everything I want you to do. I want you to tell me the story, but I'm trusting that you know what you're doing enough. Not even just enough. They just more times than not, especially now, I'm getting people who really, it's hard for me to say this, people say they love my what I'm doing, and I'm like, that's actually is really difficult for me to accept sometimes.
And why is that?
Because I'm very hard on myself, and that is kind of a double-edged sword. Sometimes that really can propel me and push me to places I never even thought I was going to go. And then sometimes it's like, oh no, but you're going too hard on yourself. and it's actually becoming an impediment to you creating the best work that you can do. So I've over the years, I've had to kind of like learn how to deal with that.
Right.
But in terms of creating the characters, usually people are like, they're already bought in, they're already fans of what I'm doing anyway. And I've had to kind of say, okay, well, if you've showed up to my table, well then yeah, you probably are in the audience, and I don't have like, there's not a thing that I have to concern myself with in terms of you trying to fight me.
Right.
Like we're actually on the same team, and I'm going to do what I can do to make this thing experience for you. And in terms of how I'm going to approach it, I just want to think specifically about what is the experience that they are looking for.
Right.
And the cool thing about it is figure drawing has helped with that tremendously. Because if I, like the next convention I go to, like Isabella here is one of our models in the audience here. And, having drawn her and painted her several times, someone's going to probably come up to me with a character, and I'll go, ooh, that character reminds me of Isabella. Yeah. And so once I get that feeling, I'm like, all right, I know what you want. I know what you're looking for. And I just like go in, and as soon as they get the piece, they're like, what am I even looking at right now? But figure drawing definitely over the years has prepared me to do convention characters like at not just at the quality, but even at a rate that I actually enjoy. Like if I want to do 5 or 10, cool. If I only want to do 2 or 3, that's cool. But everybody is happy. Everyone is satisfied with what they got, and I get satisfied because I actually did the thing that I wanted to do.
Right.
Right. So that's how I approach it.
So let's have some questions from the audience. Let's make these things hard, people. Like, I don't want to have anything easy. Somebody give me something hard. Yes.
It's not hard, but I want to know a little bit behind the show. Explain a little bit about the people.
Oh, okay. I run a drawing group, a life drawing group, where we work from a model once a week out of the studio of Kevin Chambers, who is the sculptor in this front room. And Alicia and I have our studios at the same place in Southwest Atlanta. So she had approached me months ago asking me if I would like to curate a show. And so I thought, who would I want to show with, and who do I think? And so I thought of people in the drawing group. And so I have shown for the last, Patrick McGannon, Dan Willis, and I have, actually Dan started a drawing group that I started going to about 25 years ago. And Patrick was at the group. So we've known each other, and we've met at least once a week and worked from life for 20 some years. And so I knew I wanted them to be a part of the show. Kevin is just such a phenomenal artist and is this rising star in the sculpture world. And I thought, well, we need someone that's doing something a little different than we are. And I just, when I see Xavier's work at the drawing group, it's like, what? You did what? Like, he has to be in this show too. So it was just choosing people in the group whose work I was drawn to.
That's an interesting take. I never heard your
When I came, and then everybody does like, the simple, and then you pull out all the colors and you do it, and I'm like, how did you do this in 15 minutes? Like, how?
Yeah.
So,
well, just as a quick aside on that, part of the reason why you guys probably see that is because every time I do that, I'm trying to eliminate fear from my brain as much as I possibly can. So, I'll just lay it down, and once it's gone, then I'm like, all right, we can go now. And I like doing that over and over again. Like, I just get more and more bold with whatever it is I'm doing. It's like, oh, I've got fluorescent watercolors. Okay. Like, why not? Why not like put some fluorescent orange in some place? Like.
Right next to you. Just walking in with fear.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of
So you take it as a be scared and do it anyway.
kind of, yeah. I mean, because there was a point where I realized I had a huge hole in whatever it was I knew. And once someone sort of started like my teacher, he started like kind of going, okay, well, this is that hole that you need to fill. The more I started doing that, the more I started realizing, oh, okay, I actually, like, if I want to continue to do this, I need to not be afraid to throw away my Jesus. Like, I kind of, because that could actually be holding me back from discovering the truth of what it is that I actually want to do. And I don't want to like be insensitive to it, but it's just, hey, if you're going to continue to push some boundaries here, you can't be thinking about this is not going to work. Because it will, if the foundations are right, it will work. And I can put that in a bank and I can keep that. But it only happens if I've got my foundations locked in, loaded. And that's the part where the fear starts to kind of go away. And I go, oh, that was a choice there I can make. And it might seem awkward to everyone else, but I actually understand that. I know why I want to make it. And so when everyone else sees it, it's part of the reason why, Lauren, Kevin's wife, will come up to me and say like, oh, well, why are you throwing your stuff away? And I'm like, well, because I don't think about it the way that like the audience is going to think about it. And it doesn't need to be that way. Like, you guys can enjoy it for what it is. And I just am trying to go through a process of eliminating as much of that fear in my brain as I possibly can. And if I continue to do that, then you guys will continue to like what I'm doing.
Well, that's why you should not throw it away.
If anybody's looking for an original Xavier, just look at the dumpster behind Kevin. They're all in there.
I mean, if that happens, then I'm like, can I be held responsible for that if there's like a mob?
Somebody's dumpster diving for your work? I guess that's no.
I'm just saying. But anyway, that's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
Do we have any other questions in the audience? Anybody? Yes, Isabel.
I have a question I'll start with so many questions, but I'll start with the one for both of you. Is there a moment in a piece where you're working on it and you kind of have this moment where you're like, ooh, this is really going somewhere good? And then you hit that feeling and you're like, uh-oh, I don't want to mess it up. And then if you do hit that moment, how do you kind of not get nervous about failing at that point and like continue to push through?
I'm going to let Susan say this one first.
I mean, you do get nervous. And I even had that happen today. We had a drawing session over at Dan's studio. And I started out and I really liked the face. And I thought, but we still had another hour in the session. And I thought, do I keep going on this? So that's always there. And I find that, and I think Xavier touched on this, the more prolific you are, the less afraid you are. If you are only going into your studio once every couple weeks, that time is going to be so precious that you're going to be fearful of, well, I have to create something great. But if you're going in and working enough so that you're failing a lot, the chances are that you won't have as much fear and you will create those pieces that are better. But I always feel like that. Like if I start a piece and something's kind of magical, I do have that fear that I don't want to mess it up. And there are times I have messed it up. And that's just a part of creating. And then there are times I haven't messed it up. So that's, you don't know. There's a part of creating where you're just not in control. And I think most creative people are control freaks. We do want to control those things around us, but the process of creating our art reminds us that we're not in control.
So what is the difference between messing it up and keep going or knowing that it's done?
What happens in the beginning? Because when I do a thumbnail, that gives me the destination. Like that tells me what I'm actually chasing. And that ties into like the foundations. Okay. But if I make an error somewhere on the piece, even though I've got like my thumbnail and I got my composition worked out, well, that only just adds to the experience of my style. Now, the opposite way is when you don't have the foundations, then you just start doing stuff and then you're saying to yourself, though, this is right. And it's like, well, no.
Yeah, but like in the instant, yeah, I get that when you point it out and stuff,
Yeah.
but like in an instant, like the figure drawing, because it's over now too, it's
Yeah.
just like hard. But like you said, Susie, with like, you didn't want to mess it up because you had that feeling, right? But when is the difference between like keep going or it's done? Like, is there more of a, you have a feeling or?
Oh, well, you want
I think, I mean, there's so many times I think I've been done with a piece, and I am done with it for that time, and it'll go out in the world, and it won't sell, and I'll get it back, and I'll think, oh, I need to do something to change this. I feel like I'm done with it when I lose interest. And so the thing that keeps me going is not knowing if I'm going to be able to accomplish what I want to accomplish. And if I see that I've created something that I feel good about, and the more I work on it, the worse it gets, like I'm not adding to it, that's when I'm done, is when I lose interest. But again, like with the IM piece, I thought I was done. And I kept going back to it, and I kept wanting to do more that I didn't feel like I had done what I wanted to do. It didn't have the feeling I wanted it to have. So, I mean, that's a difficult thing to know when you're done. And for me, it's just when I lose interest, when I'm just like, oh, I don't want to work on this anymore.
I would say also, too, just be okay with taking an L every so often. I mean, like straight up, like when I was really trying to like figure out like how to draw like certain things, like there were just some days I was like, I took a huge L. Like, this does not feel great to have not done the thing that I wanted to do. But you know, you keep coming back after you've reviewed what you've done. And I actually think that's a bigger deal than most of us give credit for, is once you've done something, it's a really good idea to look at what you did and figure out what happened. You know, if at all possible, try to figure out, get to the root of what that problem was. And then the next time you come in, you can test that and say, okay, well, I think this is the solution to that problem. And if it didn't work, okay, well then, you know, that's not the solution either. But the cool thing is now you know what the failed attempt was. You don't have to do that again. The bad part is when you have failed and you continue to do the same thing over and over again. You know, and I mean, it's part of us. Sometimes we have to bang our heads on the wall sometimes a million times before we realize we have to stop. But I mean, I think sometimes you just have to say, I took an L. And if you can accept that, then it leaves you more room for someone to come in and say, oh, this was the thing that you were chasing, and I can now give this to you so that you can go along and do the thing that you're trying to like put down on the paper. You know? So that would be my answer for that.
Do we have some other questions from the audience here? Isabella, did you guys just all give the questions to Isabella? It's like you're just like, you know. All right, so yes,
I got a quick
Adam.
question. It's really about presence and what you do when you find yourself battling between the model in the room and the model in your head.
Oh,
How do you get yourself back to the now?
I think, yeah, I mean, that's a real problem if, you know, I mean, ultimately what you want to happen is to have that focus, to have that hyper focus. And there are some days you just don't have it. And everything you do is just not turning out, and it's just wrong. And there are some days that are just good days in the studio or working with the model, and there's some days that you just can't do anything right. And it's hard to it's hard to know why that is. But again, going back to, what we were talking about before, the more you do it, the more successes you have. It may be the same percentage, like you may only like 25% of what you do, but if you're doing a lot more, that 25% gives you more experiences of, oh, it worked this time. And a lot of times I find that sometimes there's one little piece of a piece that I do that I think, really like that. Something magic happened there, even if I don't like the rest of it. And I have to sort of give myself permission to look at just that one piece and say, okay, well, at least that was a success, even though the rest of it wasn't. But I feel like artists are constantly playing this game in their heads of, you want people to like your work, you want people to admire your work. You have to sort of get that out of your head while you're creating. And that's sort of a constant back and forth of, I just want to be in the moment. I just want to focus on the model. And especially if it's an awesome pose and you see what you want to do and you don't know if you can live up to it. That's always disappointing. Because sometimes, a lot of times you can't. So I guess that would be my answer. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah,
I actually had
that's one of my first. Somebody's can't get anything right.
Yep.
Well, I had that with Isabella to that because I was so into it. He has amazing poses.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't get it down. And I didn't have it. And actually, you said that you didn't have it either. I just, like what I did to stay focused because I wanted to wander off. I just studied her. Like literally, like where her muscles were to not get in my head. So I don't know if you guys do that. If that's something. I was just like.
Well, I think for me, before I even go to a figure drawing session, I have a plan on what I want to do. Like I am probably in my, like, even if I haven't written it down, like sometimes I'll write it down, sometimes I won't. But even as I'm driving to the place, or even as soon as Susie sends the email, like, oh, this is the model that we're going to have this week. In my mind, I go, all right, well, what's my plan? And that's going to give me a level of intention. Like when I come in, okay, this is the only thing that matters to me. Like my phone could ring. Like hopefully my wife is not blowing me up and is like telling me something that the kids have done. Somebody's broken their neck or something like that. But generally speaking, that doesn't happen. So nothing else actually matters in that moment other than what did I come to learn in that time. And generally speaking, that ends up being some of the best drawing that I do because, I'm actually focused on just learning one thing instead of like trying to learn, 50 million things at
Would
one
that be
time.
like, for instance, like lighting? You're paying more attention to lighting?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like this week I could say, well, I want to just figure out what are the shapes and the shadows. And that will just be all that I do for the whole time. Mm-hmm. And once I'm done with that, then, all right, well, that was that lesson for the week. I don't like to get into switching, like I'm going to learn how to do shadows and light and color and perspective. That your brain can't do that. we just cannot. And I think the wiser approach is to say, pick like one thing, be intentional about that one thing and say like, this is what I came to do today. You do that enough, then you've got a library. And once you've got a library, now you've got a business. And when you've got a business, you're making money. And it all kind of works together in that sense. So, and I think even to that last point, sometimes when, Susie says like, oh, we're wondering if this will sell or this will not, it's like, that's tied into it, but it all kind of works together if you just kind of pare it down to this is what's important today. Mm-hmm. And just do that every single day. Even if it means today, I don't feel like drawing anything. My sister, like the way that I like kind of, because I've got, again, I got kids. Some days I just cannot do anything. I just don't have time to do anything. But I've done this enough to kind of be able to say, all right, well, even if I step away for a day, I won't be lost. I don't want to be I can be stuck, but I can't be lost. That's the worst. That's the worst place. And if you have that perspective, I think everything will be just fine. You know?
Well, and also as part of the groups that we do, we start with 1 minute drawings and gesture drawings. And so you know that you're not going to get anything that is going to be something you can sell in 1 minute. It's just about getting in this zone of creating. You know, in the groups that I go to where we do a long pose, we always start with gestures. And we don't go straight to the long pose, because when you show up and then there's a model and you're showing up to do this long pose, there's a big threshold that you have to walk over. Yeah. And so doing the 1 minute poses, and then we do 2 minutes and we do 5 minutes, it's an hour of short poses. And so even though you might start out, you know, with hesitancy, at some point, hopefully you get into that rhythm of being in a different zone. You draw intuitively and you don't think too much, and you're not worried about, oh, did I do this right? You don't overanalyze. So doing those warm-up exercises, I think, really helps to sort of enter into a bigger piece.
Yeah, and 2 to 20 minutes. I mean, really anything that you do as an artist, I believe you can solve the problem in 2 to 20 minutes. Everything else is just a nuance, a detail that will add to it or take it away, but the problem is solved. And as long as you can solve it, like as long as you've got that down, you're bulletproof. You know, you've got the house built. Now you can add paint. You know, do that try to figure that out in those shorter time limits, and you'll definitely see a big jump in what you're gonna do. And don't be afraid to again, say fail or make a mistake or whatever, because but like we talked earlier, photography took out perfection for us. No one cares if we're perfect anymore. So just take some risks, man. Like that's all you can really do, and that'll be more fun. And then once it's more fun, then you're more engaged in the moment because you're enjoying what you're doing.
I have one final question before we wrap it all up. And it's a question from a perspective that I don't think as artists we actually hear very often. This is actually for Isabella.
Ooh.
Yes. Hey. So, I feel as artists, a lot of times we see the model as a muse, as an object, as something that we don't necessarily, I don't want to say think of as human, but it's something that we are rendering for our own devices or whatever else as a project. But as a model, what is your relationship to the artist in the room? Do you read the room to select your poses, or do you have a select run through that you already have? How do you, what is the relationship like? I mean, this is kind of a perspective I've always been curious at, having drawn from the model for years myself.
Well, oh man. I will say I do think that as I have started to get the swing of modeling, I've started to cater a little bit more to my group. So when it's Susie and Xavier, I'm like, okay, I can get upside down on this chair and then they'll figure it out. But if it's like a classroom of like beginner artists, I'm like, okay, maybe we don't do that yet. Right. So a little bit of that of like, okay, how much like the level of contortion that you want to bring, kind of I'll cater that. But then also something that's becoming a newer experience for me in this is as I'm getting to know them more too, and kind of know their personalities and developing that kind of relationship. I've also started to do different things and also get more comfortable in my own motion, which is not something I expected to experience. Right. At Kevin's group, it's at Susie's group at Kevin's studio. It's been really fun to kind of experience that freedom a little bit more, as it's felt more like home as I've kind of started to get to know them a bit more. And then something that I'm learning too is that personal relationship for me is so important. And I didn't realize that at the beginning.
Right.
But it really lands quite differently for me when I'm in front of a group where, I don't know anybody and it's kind of, first time. And I notice that I'm a lot stiffer and maybe not as connected into my own performance piece of it. And then when I get to know a group or get to know an artist, it's like, okay, like we're in this together. So I'm going to put on a show.
But that's what I appreciate is having worked with you is it feels more like performance art than it does just a pose to create art from, which is I think what we all appreciate. So,
thank you.
yes.
That means the world.
I mean, that is a really cool thing that you do, the really extravagant poses that you do, because again, we don't see this stuff just everywhere. So in order for us to kind of like lock that into what we want to do, we need you bring whatever it is that you bring, So
Well,
we always appreciate it.
And sometimes it gets tough. You're sitting in the middle of a model pose and she picks something. You're like, are you fucking kidding me? It's like, you just stand there for a minute.
I was just like, all right, I'm just going to watch this beautiful picture right there because I cannot put it on paper.
Well,
it's very inspiring. Like I haven't noticed that, and frankly, until probably this conversation is when that light bulb has finally clicked of, oh, it's because I'm drawing inspiration from y'all as a group. With
I mean,
the
this
energy that group
definitely.
has.
It's not just me thinking. This is like pretty symbiotic. Like I mean, it's been awesome having you as a model. I mean, easily having drawn from the model for years myself, you're easily one of my favorites. I'm like, thank God, somebody that actually pulls off some dynamic movements. Thank God.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. They made.
There you go.
Oh my gosh.
Is there any other questions for anybody? Even the model? Well, if there is not, I thank everybody for coming out. We are doing this monthly. We love having the artists here, being able to do the artist talk. I hope this was insightful for you guys to be able to kind of pick their brains a little bit, see what their process is and what their thought processes are on different stuff. And other than that, please stick around afterwards. We still have food and the drink in the back. Look at the art, buy the art, and meet the artist a little bit more if you want. But I appreciate everybody coming out. It was awesome. This has been a great show. It's still going on for a few more days, but yeah, thank you again, everybody. All right.
How do I turn this
All
on?
right. All right. Was that good?
Yeah, no,
That worked? All right. Excellent.
Really,